Hi, Bob. I want to continue our discussion from the other day. And first of all, thank you so much for discussing morality and God with me. And it was good to discuss it with someone who disagrees with me and was very thoughtful. And it was a great discussion. And it helped me clarify my thoughts on the subject, which is why I'm coming back to you with this now because I thought about some more. One of the things we discussed that I made a concession during our discussion that morality has changed or evolved over time. I want to withdraw that concession. It doesn't fit with what I actually observe. The other thing I want to say is whether you believe it or not, I am committed absolutely to being logical, to being honest with myself, and to following the truth wherever it leads. I'm open minded to the idea that God does not exist. I don't think it's logical, and I don't think I would be honest to believe that. However, I am definitely want to know the truth, the real truth. Absolutely, regardless of how that affects my life. I want to follow the truth wherever it leads. Okay, so now starting with that, I want to recap our conversation a little bit and think it through logically. So we first thought, well, I shouldn't say we first thought, but let's start at the beginning. If right or wrong comes from within the individual's mind, okay, the gray matter between our ears and nothing else, then that is determined by our DNA, etc. And I have no reason to say that my decision about how to live my life and do what I do is no more right or wrong than Hitler's decision to do what he did. I don't think that's I don't think that is true. I think there's obviously a difference in the right and the wrong of your and I morality and Hitler's. So therefore, right or wrong must come from something other than the individual mind. Now, let's go to a broader sense then and say that right or wrong is determined by humanity in some way. Well, for there to be a broad-based idea of morality among humanity, it must be determined by popularity. That only makes sense. There's no other logical possibility. So now, if that were true, then let's say we have to accept that that is true whether we like the answer or not. And true right or true wrong at any one time, and that could change, I will concede that it could be that morality changes. I don't think it does, but it could be. And also, you do not have to agree with a morality for it to be true. I'm looking for true right and true wrong and how that is determined. And I also think I should have stepped back at the beginning and said that I think if there is a law, which I believe morality obviously appears to be like a law has to have a lawgiver. If there is no government in the United States, there is no speed limit. And I think that is obviously true. You cannot get away from that. If there's no government, there's no speed limit. If there's no lawgiver, there's no law. It is an obvious truth. It's calling the emperor naked. All right? So if we're going to be honest and accept that's the case, then we have to look for the source for morality. It obviously can't be the individual mind because I'm not going to accept that Hitler is, or someone of that ilk is not wrong. They are wrong and we are right. And we have to have some kind of scale to judge that by, which gets us back to popularity among humanity. Now, let's say that morality, true right and true wrong, really is determined by humanity. Then we have to say that if 99.9%, and that's the percentage you used, of humanity agreed that something was right, it would be truly right. We wouldn't have to agree with the 99.9%, but it would be truly right for them at that time. So if 99.9% of humanity at some day in the future or in some day in the past determined that sacrificing children or raping a 6-year-old was truly right, it would be truly right. And I don't think that is observably what happens in the world. I don't think that is true, and I'm not willing to accept that. I'm not willing to accept that slavery is ever right, okay? It doesn't matter if it was popular in the 1825 or in 825 or in 1825 BC. It was still wrong. Okay? Raping a 6-year-old is wrong. And I don't care if 100% of humanity says that it's right. Raping a 6-year-old is wrong. So how do we explain that? I don't think you would accept that either. Raping a 6-year-old is always wrong. Yet, if we are going to say that morality comes from within humanity in any way, shape, or form, we would have to accept that in some circumstance, it could be possible in the future that that would become morally right. It would be truly right. It won't. It never is. So that leaves us with a morality that is somehow established outside of humanity. And if a law exists, it has to have a lawmaker. Now, I want to explain how, because obviously slavery has been more or less acceptable at different times. So let's start with that, okay? My example of how this actually works in reality is a baby. When a baby is 6 months old and it bites its mother's shoulder, the mother will pull it away and look at the baby and smile and say, "No, no, that hurt your mommy." And then when it's a year old and it does the same thing, the mother will pull it away and say, "No, don't bite me." And when it's 2 years old and it bites its mother, the baby's likely to go in the corner. "No, you do not bite." And when they're 20 years old, if people go around biting people and it's not in self-defense, they're likely to end up in some type of an institution. So my point is, the idea that biting an innocent person is wrong never changed, but it was applied differently based on the maturity of the individual. Humanity is like that individual. Surely we as humans are more mature than we were 1,000 years ago or 3,000 years ago. We have a higher expectation in the world of ourselves and possibly from an outside source. We are more mature today than we were 2,000 years ago and 4,000 years ago. So morality, in my opinion, has never changed. It simply is applied differently to us as humans based on our maturity, both as a group and as individuals. Now this explains a lot. That allows for the sense that something is right and something is wrong, whether it is popular among humanity or not. Now you can say slavery was always wrong, and it is always wrong. Discrimination based solely on someone's skin color is always wrong, was always wrong, will always be wrong. Raping a 6-year-old is wrong, was always wrong, will always be wrong. What Hitler did was always wrong, is always wrong, and will always be wrong. All that is allowed for within this scope of that morality exists outside of humanity. And it applies to humanity differently based on humanity's maturity. Now, I think that we would both agree that all that makes perfect sense. The next problem you have is, okay, if it exists outside of humanity, who's the lawgiver? Who's the morality giver? We can disagree on that all day long, and we can think about it. But I think that is a more realistic question, and that becomes extremely difficult if you don't believe in God. Now, I don't think this should be the only reason for someone to believe in God, though I think it's pretty darn persuasive because it fits with what we observe in reality. If we're honest with ourselves in our heart of hearts, we know what we've come to so far is true. So, yes, I think that the lawgiver is God. And that makes sense to me. And then I look around and I find many other proofs within science and otherwise that God exists, and they start to make a lot of sense. So if you start this argument from the point of view that God absolutely cannot exist, and you're not open-minded to the possibility of God, now you're left with two possibilities. You either find some other source outside of humanity that is a lawgiver. Very, very, very difficult. And if you think science will do that someday, that's fine. But then what you're actually doing is you are making science God, and you are expressing faith in that God, which is no different than me expressing faith in a being that exists. Okay? Now, your other option is to say that true right or true wrong comes from within humanity. And if that humanity ever decides that raping a 6-year-old is okay, if that becomes popular within humanity, that it truly is okay, whether you agree with it or not. You have to live with that. And I don't think that's reasonable. I don't think you can stand that. I don't think that's within your heart of hearts that you know that that's right, because it's not. And you know it's not. So, that's my thoughts. I think they're reasonable. I think they're logical, extremely logical. They may not be fun, they may not be popular, but I think it's pretty darn good logic. So, thank you.